that I've never forgotten. He said, the phrase was tyranny of the possible. If it's something we can do, we will do it. Now, if we are now in charge, if humans are in charge, what's to keep us from doing just the most disgusting things that could harm the planet, harm ourselves? I mean, how are we gonna regulate ourselves?
It's a very good question. Is if humans are in charge, if we are indeed the quote God, how do we regulate ourselves to do things smartly rather than destroy the planet? Well, I think somebody here already said we've already done a lot of that. The horrors committed during World War II, World War I, the genocides around the world, what is occurring now that ISIS is carrying on in the Middle East. The brutal traffic in kids and slaves and sexual slaves and everything. I mean, we do horrible, horrible, horrible things to each other, and we do horrible, horrible things to the planet. How to stop us from doing it? I don't know. A lot smarter people than me have tried to address this. We hope that we have the rule of law in countries. If they apply the rule of law, then we won't stop all horrific things or terrible behavior, but at least we'll make them a lot less. I believe that if more of the world was democratic, there would be fewer of these horrors and a greater check and balance on as much as the United States doesn't do everything correctly. We do have a clean air law. We do have a Clean Water Act. We do have an Endangered Species Act. We have the rule of law. Yes, people try and get around it all the time and so forth. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than what you have in Russia, China, India, many other parts of the world, most of the Middle East, most of Southeast Asia, a good deal of South America. So I think the short answer is the best political system will, on average, produce the wisest behavior. Not perfect, but certainly wiser than what we're doing now. And this, I'm not going to make a political statement, but this is certainly relevant to the upcoming elections. Very, very relevant. Both in Kansas as well as nationwide.
Not getting specific, however.
I'm not mentioning any.
Because there could be a Brownback supporter here. I hope there is.
I'm not mentioning names. I'm just saying the election is very important. Yes, sir.
Two things that I think are related. If I'm understanding your use of high and low belief correctly, then I believe that low belief is founded on high belief. And you showed us why the two need to work together. I might have missed how they work together.
I think this room is an excellent example of how they can work together. I've been asked to speak a number of times at the Unitarian Fellowship and here at Ecumenical Ministries. Organizations such as this, where people gather in a room, where I would bet if I asked a question, how many of you have high beliefs and how many of you have low beliefs? And I think the same number of hands would go up each time, because you have both, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think they interact when they don't try and supplant one another, when they don't try and establish that this is my turf and I'm going to invade your turf. The two get in, high and low beliefs get into trouble. Faith and reason get into trouble. When reason tries to tell people how to have faith and what to have faith in, and where faith tells reason that everything you found is wrong, because it violates a certain scripture on which my faith is based. I mean, high and low beliefs are a different way of conceptualizing the universe, the planet, and our life on the planet. They're two completely different ways of conceptualizing our existence than the existence of everything else. If one tries to say the other is wrong and tries to occupy, then you have war. You have, one country of belief invading another country of belief. You have high belief invading low, low belief invading high. This is why I don't debate creationists anymore, extreme creationists, young earth creationists anymore, because I think neither science nor religion has done a service, neither high or low belief has done a service by attacking one another and going for the jugular and trying to make the other one look stupid. Doesn't do me any good, and I have done this, and I've won many of them. It doesn't do anybody any good for me to point out that, why would God make an animal like a rabbit that has to survive by eating its own feces? Surely an engineer like God could have produced a better intestine. It's ridiculous, because those are two separate spheres of thought, and both are fine. Just either keep them separate or work together as they do in this room and many, many other ones. That's how they can work together. They can work together in trying to understand how the principles and ethics of high belief can work together with the principles, ethics, and knowledge of low belief to carry out smart policy and smart stewardship. Yes, sir.
Comment and a question. First, kudos for your combination of art and humanity in your
Thank you.
presentation on science.
Thank you.
My limited understanding of where biology is going is that they're steering away from exploring the new species and things. If you want to get tenure, you don't describe species nowadays. Is there any hope for getting further up that curve?
Well, I think the question is that there's a sense that biological science is getting away from the kind of science I was talking about, going out in the world and discovering the rest of the life of the planet, and you can't get tenure doing that, or it's very difficult. And it is true that, say, starting in the 70s, 80s, there was a huge movement away from the study of whole organisms and the plants and animals of the planet to the study of genes, because genes was a whole new thing. And it swamped many college campuses, it swamped many biology departments to the point where the study of whole organisms was discontinued. And every faculty member who retired or left was replaced by somebody who studied cells and proteins and genomics. Fortunately, this did not happen at the University of Kansas. Like many other things, Kansas missed the boat. And you know what? It's fortunate that it did. So Kansas, and including the White Diversity Institute that I have the privilege of directing in the Natural History Museum, and the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, is one of the strongest in the country. We've been ranked along with the Smithsonian and Harvard. We have expeditions ongoing this year to all 7 continents of the world, Antarctica, and the Arctic, and Southeast Asia, and South America, and Central America. And it's, I'm happy to say that this surge of genomics is flattening out, and the genomicists are realizing they need to know a lot more about the whole organism, its ecology, its behavior, where it lives and why, and so forth, in order to have knowledge of the whole biology, in order to make the genomics go further. So much like high and low belief, as gentleman there asked, you're seeing an integration now of genomics and whole organism biology. As a matter of fact, now when you apply for grants in the National Science Foundation, you better combine both. You can't just do one. If you do just genomics, you're not going to get funded. If you do just whole organism biology, you won't get funded. You have to form consortia and teams to do both. And we do that, and that's a good sign, because biology is not divisible into just genomics and whole organisms. The genomics are part of the whole organism, and if we're going to understand the life of the planet, we have to understand everything from a gene all the way to ecosystems. And we have had people here get tenure that have studied whole organisms. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. A very wise man, more than 200 years ago, 1797, created a religion in Paris, which lasted for about 6 years, and was devised by Napoleon himself, which was based upon a different approach to the science and religious point of view. He suggested that instead of studying theologians or theology is the study of God, the entity supposedly of God, and he suggested that instead of that we study that which God created, which is nature. Which is the nature that
Nature.
God created, which is another interpretation of God's nature.
Right.
The nature that God created.
Will you repeat that?
I'll repeat it. So there was a famous man, still not named, in 1797, he said that in France, who started a whole field which survived all of 6 years, that the proposition was, instead of studying God, instead of theologians studying God, theologians should study God's products and creations, including humans and nature. Who is this individual?
Thomas Paine.
I'm sorry?
Thomas Paine.
Oh, Thomas Paine, yes, of course. Yeah. Well, it didn't last just 6
And now,
years.
who are the people who study God's nature, the nature created by God?
Well, many theologians took up that, and many other and then they were called natural philosophers, took that up. I would say it survived.
Isn't that what scientists do?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So
Well-
how is there a conflict between science and religion when the scientists are studying the nature that God created?
All right, the difference there is, and if you ask me, I would say scientists study nature, period.
Right.
The rest of that sentence, that God created, is
Right.
not the province of science.
Right.
That's high belief. And the
Right.
province of science starts with the word nature, period.
Right.
Low belief. Okay,
That's, I don't disagree with
okay. Yes,
I assume that you believe there are living things elsewhere in the universe. Do you think that some UFOs are real? They have living things directing them?
Repeat the question.
I'm going to tell you a story. I'm a paleontologist by training. I spent 20, 30 years in paleontological expeditions all over the world. One of the most interesting ones was near Cuba, New Mexico. I was sitting one day with a field crew. It's about 110, sitting in a truck, doors open, there was no shade, on a gravel road, eating lunch. And suddenly, there was no shadow to go to, or else we would have gone to it. Suddenly, the truck was covered in a shadow, huge shadow. And it was a silent, black, huge, moving shadow. And it moved slowly over our heads, about 500 feet up, maybe 1,000 feet up. I thought to myself, why is God giving us this shadow right now? And I climbed out of the truck, and there above us, flying over us, silently, not a whisper, was this huge black plane. Silent. That was my UFO. I had no idea what it was. But the Air Force knew what it was, because they were testing it, and there's Kirkland Air Force Base, south, just south there. It's probably now one of those, spy planes. It's probably one of the very silent spy planes that can fly at 78,000 feet or 100,000 feet and record the strokes that you make on your computer. No. In my low belief, no. I don't think there might be. There are UFOs insofar as people see things they can't explain. But that's a long way from saying that UFOs are alien spaceships from the planet Mongo that have come to visit us. There are lots of things that people see in the sky that they can't explain because of optical illusions, hallucinations, they've taken LSD, who knows? Until there is actually a spacecraft that lands and little funny things get out of it and we can talk to him or photograph him or something. No, I don't believe that. There is no evidence, not a matter of belief, there is no evidence that we have been visited by alien beings. Do I think that there might be that there might be life elsewhere in the universe? Absolutely. Absolutely. There is life elsewhere in the universe. I would say the odds are very high. And there's a famous equation that astronomers trot out called Drake's equation, where you add up all the bodies in the universe and how many of them go around suns and how many of them go around suns in the right direction from the sun for life to occur, and how many of them are not double planets, and so on and so on and so on. And they arrive at approximately, on the high side, there's maybe a million or 20 million bodies in the universe that could possibly harbor life. But it's a wild guess. Yes, sir.
I struggle remaining optimistic about the future of our species. But more importantly, because all things change eventually, I think. But more importantly, I worry that we're going to screw it up for every other species on this planet. What's your stance on trying to remain optimistic, or are you?
It's a very good question. The question is, it's hard to remain optimistic about the human influence on the planet and the future, and what is my prognosis for humans doing the right thing as opposed to screwing it up even more. I think my answer is I would rather be optimistic than pessimistic, because it just makes the life we have a lot more pleasant. I think that there is enough evidence that when threatened with lousy stewardship, evil, and so forth, the human species does eventually band together in certain ways to stop that and to do the right thing. The world wars are an example. We did put an end to it. We did stop forms of evil. We do try, and we do have we do have a terrific amount of environmental acts that certainly the United States and certainly all throughout Europe and parts of South America, parts of Southeast Asia, that try and protect the environment. President Obama just set aside a huge, huge area of marine sanctuary around the Hawaiian Islands. We should do a lot more. I am encouraged. It takes, if I was going to switch that around, my question would be, how can we become more of a fast-acting species as opposed to a slow-acting species? How can we become more of a species that looks into the long term as opposed to just doing everything in the short term? Think about it. Everything that many of our institutions that we've established reward you for short-term thinking. 2 years for congressional elections, 6 years for senatorial elections, 4 years for presidential elections, that's all short term. What can you promise the voter and do in the short term? You're not going to talk about the long term. You don't win elections talking about the long term. Second, our entire corporate structure. Don't get me wrong. I think capitalism and democracy go hand in hand. But one of the downsides of capitalism is that that's even shorter term. It's, you know, what did the Dow Jones do for me today? What's my stock value today and tomorrow and the next day? But again, many corporations are changing their thinking. The amount of green corporations today, I would say, is 100-fold more worldwide than 5 years ago. The insurance companies, one of the biggest insurance company in the world, Swiss Re, this has issued this fantastic book that could be a manifesto for a green revolution and smart energy policy, because they know the disaster and the monies they're going to have to pay out because of climate change. That our own Department of Defense has just issued this manifesto of how harmful climate change will be to national security, both the United States and world, with the soldiers worldwide. You know, most of the American agencies, they all recognize this, and they have to take action for it, because they're going to have to deal with terrorism, with, you know, people on the move, huge refugee problems, trying to get towards sources of water and sort of escape wars. All of which, much of which is caused by environmental perturbations. So slowly but surely we're getting there, and I'm optimistic that despite our failings, despite our short-term thinking, despite our terrific wrangling over short-term interests like business versus long-term interests, survival and stewardship, we will end up doing the right thing at great cost. At great cost. So we almost destroyed the fisheries of the planet, but we haven't. Because we realized that if you use up all the fishes of the planet with untrammeled fishing on the world's oceans, they're going to be gone in 25, 30, 40 years. And then what do we do then? And most nations, except for the few, are observing that. And they're, you know, Canada and Japan almost went to war over fishing cotton in the North Atlantic. Canada wants to preserve it. Many of the Japanese rogue fishermen, you know, are not listening to their own government, trying to break the law. So I am optimistic.
Thank you very much, Leonard. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.